To introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, we give you Manila Bulletin's editor for Property, Living, and Sustainability and Environment section. A round of applause for Mr. Ray Ilagan.
Esteemed guests, respected members of the faculty, our dear Tomasians, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an honor to introduce to you one of our respected keynote speakers for this significant event. He is the principal architect and founder of WTA Architecture and Design Studio, who advocates for social architecture, promoting humanist designs that build and strengthens community. He is one of the key people behind projects such as the Bookshop project in Intramuros, Manila, that gained various global recognitions and awards, including the Jurors and People's Choice Award in 2017, Asia Pacific Entrepreneurship Award in 2019, and the BCI Asia Top 10 Architectural Firm in 2018. As a firm believer of sustainable planning and the advantages of urban living, his commitment to sustainable architecture is evident in his urban planning projects, where he explores new ideas about our surroundings and his ability to integrate sustainability in large-scale urban developments. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome architect William T. Jr.
So good morning. Today I'd like to talk to you guys about some ideas that interest our office as we go. So some ideas that interest our office, as we go through, our daily work and, the practice of architecture. So our firm is primarily focused on social architecture. This is the DNA of all our projects. It guides us in all, the ideas that we do and implement in the many works that we do. And social architecture is about creating, freedom of movement, more intimate spaces, and just plainly helping build communities. So today our topic is, the environment and sustainability. So sometimes one of the things we ask is, which environment are we talking about, right? We have the natural environment, which looks for balance. We have the built environment, which relies pretty much on technology. But there's also the human environment that's about our social interactions and our social spaces. When we talk about sustainability, it's about maintaining, the quality of life or what we have into the long term. And yet, if we are not happy with what we have right now, that just means that it's not about sustaining what we have. It's about improving our daily lives, our cities, and our neighborhoods. So some ideas about sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, there's different scales of sustainability. There's the personal, which largely is about our lifestyle choices, what we consume, what we eat, about using renewables and everything. There's also, the scale of the family. It's about living practices between how we teach our children, our creating awareness, and the resources that we share between us, meaning power, water, and how we conserve these. There is also the community level or community scale. When you get to the community, we talk about open spaces, we talk about neighborhood programs, about planning, about community facilities. And then there's the urban scale, where we talk about urban planning, about transportation, waste management, the big things, about the economy. Then, of course, there's the national scale, where we talk more about policy, about the development goals and how we meet them, and of course, the economy and everything, and then green infrastructure. There's also about a scale that reaches out to humanity, which is about cooperation, how different countries work together, what are the guiding principles that help shape, the vision that we push humanity towards. But as architects, we're largely focused on the family, community, and urban scale. And personally, we work more on the community scale. So that is kind of our focus as architects in terms of sustainability. So one of the things that we've been interested in is about our vanishing shores. Of course, we talk about climate change, the rising sea waters and everything. But one of the things also that we forget is that there are many things that lead towards our vanishing shores. We have commercial tourism and development. There is environmental degradation, mining, overfishing, commercial industrial fishing. There's urban expansion where the growth of the cities, eat up the small villages and small coastal towns that we have. There's also, of course, climate change that leads to rising seawaters. And these are kind of like some examples throughout the country where you will see how the city has expanded to eat into the villages, how tourism, eats into our local communities, how climate change is very challenging, especially for the island communities. And then there's also about climate change, right? So how has the climate been changing? If you look at this, these are the typhoon patterns every decade, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. So somehow, Manila has been getting less typhoons. So each square there, the intensity of the color is how many times a typhoon passes through it. So if you look at this graph or this image, the typhoons have been veering northwards. So we've been getting less typhoons in Manila. The white line is kind of like where the typhoon median is. So the dark lines primarily create the main path of the typhoon. And yet, one of the things that's also changing is that the southern part of the country, meaning Mindanao, has been getting more typhoons over the last decade. And this is important because the provinces with the highest poverty incidence are those where the typhoons hit. So that's the graph on the right. Another thing that interests us is this idea of flooding, that it does not affect the urban poor or the informal settlers, but actually affects a lot of the suburban or like the urban sprawl, that grows around many of our outlying towns like Cavite, Rizal, and so forth. And sometimes this is underreported because we are more focused on people living by the river. So we talk about density as well. Density is something that is very interesting to us. One of the things that we have to reinforce is that higher density is more sustainable. Okay, higher density allows us to have mass transportation, allows us to bring services to the people. It allows us to open up more space. And so we can see the numbers. Higher density leads to higher GDP per capita, or per capita GDP. Higher density means more walkable cities and less carbon emissions. Lower density leads to urban sprawl. Urban sprawl means you have to service more and more of your city. You have to build more roads, more power lines, serving fewer people. And so, of course, that's one thing. The other thing about low density is it eats up open space. So we have fewer and fewer open space. It eats up agricultural land. It eats up farms and parks. So the sprawling effects on agriculture is very evident. There's global studies, local studies. This particular graph is in Imus, Cavite. We've lost 600 hectares of agricultural land over the last 10 years. And production has gone down by about 50%. So density itself also has challenges. The challenges with density is that what we see in our city, it's overbuilt. You have the urban heat island effect and everything. And this is largely brought about because we don't have proper urban plans, right? So we allow people to build everywhere. Of course, in a very dense city, land prices go up. And without the proper guidance of policy and the state, they build everywhere. Another problem is that people, at least in the Philippines, we Filipinos tend to live where it's hottest. Or it actually becomes hottest where we live because of the heat island effect. And one thing that can mitigate this is tree cover. Because if you look at studies, there's negative 2.23 degrees centigrade where it's covered with trees. And every 1 meter of average tree height lowers urban temperature by 0.19 degrees centigrade. So when we get to urban planning, one of the things that are important when we do this is to look at scale and understand the cities that we're actually building. These are the biggest cities in the world through time or throughout history. It ranges from Europe in the Middle East, Athens during its peak or its golden age, Rome where we had 1 million people, and this went down, during the Middle Ages where Florence had 100,000 people. But then at that time, Asia, China, and Baghdad had about at least 500,000 to 1 million people. And then this was not reached again until London in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. And New York was the first city to hit 10 million. And now Tokyo has 40 million people. So this is the scale of urbanity that we're dealing with, as planners. And if you look at this, Metro Manila is actually one of the biggest cities in the world in terms of population. We have about 28 million people. We're number 6. We're the 6th biggest urban agglomeration in the world. So no lessons actually from basically the West can guide us how we grow our cities. The cities we actually have to look into are Tokyo, Hong Kong, or the Pearl River Delta. These are the big cities, that can show us kind of like a roadmap. So I always like to show this comparative, of the different cities. If you look at the top line, that's Manila, Jakarta, and Bangkok. So this map shows how big our cities are. This is a 10-kilometer scale. The middle line is Tokyo, Singapore, and the Pearl River Delta. The lower is the older cities, New York, London, and Paris. As you go through them, this is about the intensity of the built-up area. So we might have the densest or one of the highest populations, but we don't have a very high density of built-up space. That's why we're living in very crowded conditions because we have not built vertically. We might think we built vertically, but that's only in certain areas. So in the high yellow areas, that's the intensity of the space. But largely, if you look at our city, it's now nowhere near as intense as Tokyo or Bangkok or the Pearl River. And you can also start to see the pattern here, where the middle row of cities are more structured, more planned. The lower row is more organic, where it had the center, London and Paris, of course, grew that way from medieval towns. And then, of course, the top row is the ASEAN cities, where it's kind of like sprawling out. This is a 2-kilometer scale of our city. This shows the uses or the different zoning types that we have. And if you again look at how the middle row is, you'll see how much more structured, especially Tokyo. Look at the density of Tokyo and how structured it is compared to us. Just going through this, this is Manila compared to Cebu and other similar type cities in terms of scale. This is Singapore, Cebu, in terms of built-up area. You can see how little built-up area Cebu has. And compare this to Fukuoka, which is about the same population, and how much built space they have. And then lastly, of course, the types of spaces we have largely restricted to either residential or commercial. And then the difference between Manila and all the rest of our cities, but the good thing is at least Manila has been slowing down in terms of growth over the last few years. All our big cities actually have been slowing down in terms of growth. And Angeles is actually growing a bit faster than Manila now. So anyway, I just end with that, and these are the things that interest our office as we do our work today. Thank you.